Hello and welcome to the Oak Spring podcast, where we celebrate the legacy of Mrs. Bunny Mellon through the work of the Oak Spring Garden Foundation. I'm Chris Stafford, and this is Season 3, Episode 4. Coming up later on the podcast, we'll be hearing, as usual, from our Director of Programs here at Oak Spring, Daniel Eady, who will have an update of all the happenings here at Oak Spring. And our focus on this month's episode is going to be the world-renowned garden here at Oak Spring, which is truly the legacy of Mrs. Bunny Mellon. So who better to reflect on Mrs. Mellon's legacy and how her vision is being implemented now under the capable hands of the head gardener here, Allissa Montgomery, who joins me now. Allissa, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Chris.
It's lovely to have you here. We see you on the grounds all the time, very busy somewhere.
Yes, always. Running from one place to another.
Exactly. Well, thank you for coming indoors, because I know probably indoors is not your favorite place.
It's not, yeah.
Well, I'd love to start, if I may, Allissa, with a little bit of background, because people who know Oak Spring will know you moving around the garden and being responsible for everything there that's growing at Oak Spring, but they may not know much about the Allissa who arrived at Oak Spring. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I am from the West Coast, but I've slowly been making my way east. I went to school in Wisconsin and had been there for the last 17 years, working at primarily two gardens there at the John Michael Kohler Art Center, and then lastly at the Bookworm Gardens in a little bit north of Milwaukee, where I was the director of horticulture there. So then I came out this way it was around the winter of 2018 when we had the terrible polar vortex and it was minus 30, and I just questioned some of my life choices and wanted to kind of discover a little bit longer of a growing season, and had known a little bit about Mrs. Mellon and her garden philosophy and her garden accomplishments. And so I had the lucky privilege of making my way to Oak Spring.
How did you connect? What was the catalyst for that? So I had studied history and education, and the last garden I worked at our primary focus was on literacy and connecting kind of books and gardens, but primarily for children and young learners. So it really sat quite firmly in my wheelhouse after kind of going back to school and getting a degree in horticulture as well. So it really just resonated. All of the things Mrs. Mellon was passionate about and loved, I felt like I had, in my experience, it really primed me for coming here and kind of getting to experience the way she gardened and she saw the world and she designed her spaces. So that's what brought me. Where does the beginning of this love of gardening start, though? Is it in the family?
Oh, it definitely is. My grandmother. We grew up in a landscape so vastly different from here in the Imperial Valley in California. So my grandmother was a great gardener, but she gardened in the desert. And so just kind of watching her kind of wrest life from the sands and the soil there really was inspiring. And my mother loved gardening and always had a garden and beautiful container plantings, and also actually loved interiors and design as well. So that has always been a part of my life growing up. So it definitely has just always been there in the background of my life.
So when you arrived at Oak Spring, Allissa, what was the garden like, the situation that you were walking into? Paint us a picture of what that looked like then so that we can maybe chronicle its evolution. But what you saw and what the challenges maybe that were facing you when you first arrived there.
Yeah, I remember I came out for an interview first early in spring, and I remember driving before even really entering
the estate here and just realizing I'm in a place that is really special. Just the change of the landscape and the way the hills rolled and the way the sun and the light worked, just realizing I'm coming somewhere that's really, really special. And then walking in, just getting a sense of the history of the place and all of the stories that were there to be discovered, and a little bit of a sleepy quality to it as well, in that, this needed the dust kicked off a little bit and the wheels kicked to kind of reawaken and reignite that agency and that passion of Mrs. Mellon's. Because at that point, the foundation had already kind of came to be, and they were still trying to figure out the direction of the garden a little bit. So it was in a kind of transition state when I came.
And that would have been 2018, was it?
Yes, I think May 2019 was when I officially started here.
And in terms of your brief then at that point, it was probably pretty overwhelming, I would imagine, when you look at the legacy of Mrs. Mellon and the tasks that you had, challenging, exciting, a tremendous opportunity for you too as a young gardener. What did you see as your biggest challenges to maintain that legacy, look towards the future, and then, in a way, be the architecture of the future?
So honestly, at the beginning, and I started as just a gardener here. I was fortunate enough to work under Judy Zatzik and then Todd Lloyd, who had worked with Mrs. Mellon for 30 odd years. So I was in a lucky position where that first year and a half, I really was able to just absorb and learn. And I made it my mission to really do that, and to move slowly and to move intentionally and to really observe and listen to what the garden said and how it spoke to people. And it was definitely a beautiful space. But there were things about it that I think just had stronger connections to Mrs. Mellon that were still waiting to be kind of dusted off. And we were also trying to figure out a new greenhouse situation, our production schedules, all of the things, the logistics of running a garden seasonally year to year. So it's just kind of figuring out those things on top of, the kind of unglamorous, but the really heavy and important work of infrastructure upgrades and repairs that had been deferred and things like that were going on as well. So it was kind of, I think you're right. It was kind of like where do you start? And you just start where you are. And then the path kind of unfolds for you a little bit. So
yes, I can imagine too. I'm curious what number of staff you had then when you started as an under gardener, and then when you took over as head gardener. What did the staffing look like?
It was a little smaller than what we are now. There were 4 of us in the garden predominantly, and then Todd was in the glass houses and up and cut flower mostly. And so we've kind of, thanks to the support of Peter Crane, been able to really figure out what our staffing census should be to operate the garden. So where we're at now, I think much better aligns with what our needs are. And, you never feel like you have enough, but I like to think like if the to-do list is still within sight, but still every day slightly ahead of you, you're in the right spot. So I think we're much closer, and we're about 6 people now, all said and done, in the garden. So that feels better aligned, I think.
And to put this in perspective, I know you're responsible for the garden within the walled garden, that is, by the house, but also beyond. So how many acres would you have total charge of?
Yeah, so I have calculated this in square feet. We're a little less than a quarter acre up in the production area, but that also includes our greenhouse production as well. And we try and produce as much on site as we can for the plant material, as that was very important to Mrs. Mellon, and she took a lot of pride in her gardeners doing that. And then we have, so that's our cut flower. We have a dahlia trial garden, and then our production complex. And then there's some auxiliary gardens throughout the site at the library, the spring house, broodmare barn. There's a few small things and some containers that we do there as well. And then now we took on post 2, so the entry garden as well. So we're very busy.
And also the Rokeby farm side.
No, actually. So we are not responsible for any of the horticulture that happens over there.
Okay.
That's firmly the farm team on that side.
Right. Okay. It's a huge operation when you put that all together. And I think for people that have seen the gardens at the house, maybe we're not aware that there's a whole other operation there on the Rokeby farm side.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just as important, both historically and like in the contemporary mission of the foundation as well. Like, and that, I think, in Peter's wisdom, including that area back has unlocked so many things that we can do programmatically that we kind of were a little bit more limited on this side. So it's such a good thing to have.
And there's several challenges that nature throws at us as well, including, the pests, the climate, ecologically, the wildlife as well. All of those you had to get your arms around and establish best practices, although I'm sure there were already some in place. Give us a sense of those challenges that you are facing now as we watch the climate change. And we're heading, as we record, into a blistering storm coming through Virginia today too. You're getting everything thrown at you.
Absolutely. And that's probably the biggest challenge, but also opportunity to demonstrate some practices and shifts away from more conventional style gardening, and to really embrace a more site-specific and adaptive approach to gardening. So it is at its core a whitewash walled garden in Virginia. So we do have, and it's a problem they combated even, 40, 50 years ago, of just it's a little heat pocket in there. And some of the things they tried, they used to do bent grass in there, and they would bring in big fans to help with the fungal disease that came with it. So some of the problems that we can avoid, we do with different species of grasses, different species of plants that are much more adapted to thriving in an environment like that. And also accepting too that some of these things are shorter lived because of the stress that they're under in a walled garden that does have a lot of stone and reflected heat with the buildings that surround it. And just also our soil management practices are different. In the 50s and 60s, when I think the garden was at its peak agency, they, managed things in a very different, more chemically focused way. And we try and do more things to build soil, to build flora and fauna in our soils there, and to really be more regenerative and sustainable in our thinking in our practices. So we've kind of tried to take a step away from that. In doing that, we've also perennialized more areas of the garden. Mrs. Mellon did love perennials, but as was kind of a taste of the time, more annuals were used. And so we definitely hold space for those in the garden, but we lean much more on things that can stay in place and can grow and need less input from us. So yeah, any way and that also too is more sustainable for us from a maintenance perspective as well, with the number of staff we have now versus what Mrs. Mellon had, which she had great fleets of people that were caring for these gardens, and the goals and the objectives were much more different than that of the foundation. But yeah, all of these things every year are things we feel like we're addressing all the time. And you had mentioned kind of the weather today. In 2022, we had a terrible storm where we lost quite a number of heritage trees on site. And so kind of figuring out a way through that and forward through that. But I'm sure that was no new thing. Mrs. Mellon did that as well, I'm sure. So yeah, just keeping the eye looking forward is the biggest thing I think we do.
Well, let's combine the legacy with the going forward pieces of this, Allissa, and look at maybe Mrs. Mellon's influences, her choices for the garden as they were, and how you've obviously honored much of that, but also repurposed it for the future goals. Let's talk about that evolution, that transition.
Yes. And I think Mrs. Mellon, in her wisdom, and is very famous as saying a garden is going to look like the gardeners that are in it and are going to be reflective of the people working in it. And it was never her intention. Mrs. Mellon, in her wisdom with the formation of the foundation, knew that she didn't want to create a static monument in the garden, and knew that, with the other things she wanted to accomplish with the foundation, it was going to mean resources might be allocated differently, or priorities might be shifted away from just doing things the way they had always been done. And she was a very forward-thinking person, and also in her architecture, in her interiors, and in the garden was very, very much so embraced change and changed things all the time, I think, throughout her gardening career at Oak Spring. Walls were lowered, buildings were changed, the layout of the garden was changed. And, it isn't until we've really done a deep dive back into the archive that we realized just how much she did allow for change in her gardens. And so I think that has helped us embrace the idea of change, with always being mindful of it's her legacy, her voice, and her stories that we want to celebrate in this garden. And I don't think we would do that great justice if we weren't trying to explore new plant material on the market, or looking at things that might be more horticulturally interesting that still align with maybe what her palette was, as things, in the world become more or less available. And so I think in order for us to honor her legacy, we have to do that through kind of constantly experimenting.
And for those, of course, who are listening, who are very deeply into the minutiae of gardening, if you will, give us a sense of how you've tweaked those different areas of Mrs. Mellon's vision in terms of the plant choices and of course the influences that she had from around the world, from historical gardens around the world.
Yeah, and she loved. She loved that European bent, but we try and, to honor place here, kind of root it in Virginia and American garden style, which is much more pragmatic, practical, and production based. But I think in looking at the garden, some of the things we know, her absolute love of pruning and structure and trees resonates through. And so that espalier work that we do, we spend a lot of time training people how to do that. All of the garden apprentices and the young gardeners that come through here oftentimes have not had any experience doing that. So it's something very unique for young gardeners to learn while they're here. And that also, echoes into the topiary work that we do in the glass houses. So making sure, and I think she would have been very, very happy with that, as I think she had wanted a pruning school of some sort to be some iteration of what the foundation ended up being. So that I take I take very seriously when we do that. And that's really, I think, the backbone of the garden. And then it's really that tension between the structure of the woody plants and the herbaceous plant material that Mrs. Mellon understood so well. So we make a lot of room for things to have either the ability to self-seed or to move around, or we consciously plant them in ways that look like they might have done that. So teaching the young gardeners kind of restraint is really important for Mrs. to really understand what Mrs. Mellon was trying to accomplish in her gardens, and to allow for the plants to have a voice and a life of their own. And it kind of means a more blousy feel. And there are things I think we do that we do come in really close to how she did them. And some things I think just tastes have changed slightly, and the eye has changed slightly. In that we do much more of like matrix style plantings, where we're planting things much closer together, where contemporary planting is a little bit different now than when Mrs. Mellon was gardening. She allowed for more space in between plants than maybe we do now, as we try and knit things together. And it's really just a taste thing, and different, we're in a different time with, a big movement kind of happening towards these big sprawling American perennial borders and gardens. And so, tastes just change. So,
So in terms of, her choices then, a color palette, the plants that she preferred, are you able to maintain that in terms of the garden's evolution? I mean, what percentage of that are you able to say, okay, we can maintain that is our heritage, but we will build around it?
Absolutely. So in respect to the plants Mrs. Mellon loved and the palette she used, we are really lucky on the garden team to have an incredibly extensive and an incredibly detailed archive of a lot of her notes to her garden team. We have invoices, seed orders, seed lists, planting plans. I think we're lucky in that I don't know that any of the other teams have quite as extensive of records as we do. And so we rely on those all of the time. And I like kind of the thought, and I tell people this all the time, I have a big view of the whole entire time she was gardening here versus a narrow moment in time when maybe I was here and I saw something. So I can look across her entire career gardening here and kind of draw narratives, draw palettes, and draw things that we may want to explore or expand upon. And there are definitely things that I feel like a lot of people are familiar with and know about the color stories and the colorways she loved. She loved a silver foliaged plant. And so we do our darndest to find as many that would have a good home in the garden as we can. And she loved wildflowers and more weedy kind of plants. So we definitely grant amnesty to a few of those per season. That's always a tricky little line to follow. And then also her sky blue flowers that she loved in the flax bed with the red poppies that come up and just kind of sing this beautiful color chorus in the late spring. And then the green flowers she loved. We've tried really hard to find them and like incorporate them in a really natural way into the garden. And then there's just plant families that she loved. And what I've found and what I think, she loved flowers more than anything, and textures and light and color and everything as a composition more than an individual plant. And, everyone kind of knows a garden should be absorbed as a whole and create a sense of peace and calm. And I really do believe that.
Well, Allissa, we all know how famous Mrs. Mellon was for keeping journals and diaries and records for everything that she did in the garden. I'm wondering what that looks like today. Is it all computerized, or do you maintain those handwritten notes?
So we're lucky enough to have access to all of the handwritten notes. We have a plant record specialist. Her name is Natalia Garcia that is working on what we're hoping to do is to digitize and include it in a very searchable database that'll make work for our course instructors and for visitors easier, so we can kind of run reports about things. They may have a question about what were her favorite plants planted in this year, and then we can pull that very easily. So we're starting to lay the foundation for that right now, and we're doing a lot of like back end work on that, but she's made a lot of progress on that. And then we also use our GIS system to visualize and map some of that information. So that will kind of correspond with that. And we already have our tree inventories done, a lot of our contemporary plants that maybe in the last 3 years that we've planted done. So a lot of bulbs that are out in the landscape are mapped and located. So we're just moving forward with that, and anything that we can do that can make access for people to these records, we're working on. And lucky enough, we also have her personal archive of images, photographs, notes to people where she may make reference of flowers or seeds she sent to people and where things went. We have the daily journals of a lot of the gardeners that just explained when she was here, when she wasn't, what flowers were going in the house and what was going with her on the plane, and things like that, that those interstitial bits of information and narrative are so important because they just reveal so much more than an invoice might. And we're really lucky to have that. And so we're working to kind of keep our records so down the road, other people can see how we've built upon that. And the future gardeners of Oak Spring can see what our thinking was behind some of the choices we were making.
Well, finally, looking forward to the future, because I know you are. Gardening is a long-term plan, and mindful that you do always embrace the beauty and the history of those gardens, which are just absolutely magnificent. And when you think of your role to preserve that and to celebrate the legacy while building for the future and to educate future gardeners there too, I'm wondering if you put your arms around all of your responsibilities, what you're most focused on now for the future, so in the short term and the long term.
Our programming has really, I think, in the broader sense, just that access piece. And I think some of the work that Rachel Heslop and Omi van Sweden have done in the historic report, and then our process of digitizing, in the library, but now also in the garden records, and kind of compiling all of this information. What I really would love to see, and this is definitely my kind of passion, is some deep scholarship about Mrs. Mellon's creative processes, and to really approach her as a force in gardening, and to really open it up to like maybe women's studies or something, that we really start exploring how it was she created, and to really approach it in a more scholarly kind of way. And I think that'll help us understand her more. And the garden, it's a constant daily task of finding her voice in there and to let it sing and let it celebrate. And it's one I feel very lucky to be able to do. And so, I think that access piece and that information and that celebration about Mrs. Mellon and her legacy, those would be my biggest goals. And we do that through programming and through all different kinds of ways. But I think just creating and maintaining a beautiful garden is the best way that I can do that.
Any final thoughts, Allissa, that you would like to share with our listeners?
Our gardeners work so hard and do such a great job. And when you're here on site, please come and say hi and ask us any questions. We love talking to people. We may be running from one thing to another, or watering this or weeding that. But they are such a passionate group of people, and so giving, and such a nice, it's such a lovely place to be, where we kind of are at the center of everything. So we get to see everybody and get to chit chat with everybody and feel really central to the mission at the foundation. And yeah, we'd love to see you. Please come and see us either at our open day or any event or class that you feel like signing up for. We're here. We're here to help in any way we can. So I think Mrs. Mellon would like that.
I wonder what she would say if she was looking over your shoulder now.
Oh, sometimes I'm a little nervous about that. But actually, you know Jay. He's a driver and he worked for Mrs. Mellon for a really long time. And he'll walk through the garden. And I think this is like the best compliment we could have. And he'll walk through and he'll say, it's different, but it's beautiful. And she would have loved it. So I'll go with that.
Perfect. Of course, you can find out a lot more about the garden by going to the website osgf.org. My thanks again to Allissa Montgomery, our head gardener here at Oak Spring, for sharing a little insight this month into the beautiful gardens of Oak Spring Garden Foundation. Allissa, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Chris. You too. Have a great day.
And joining me, as always, on our monthly podcast is our Director of Programs, Danielle Eady, with our update for this month. What do you have, Danielle?
Hi, Chris. So it is April here at Oak Spring, which is a very exciting time as the garden is in full bloom. We're looking forward to hosting our annual Virginia Historic Garden Week Open Day Tours. That's really the biggest event we have coming up this month. But of course, as you know, we have many other going on as well. So this month, we will be hosting the first cohort of our 2-week interdisciplinary residents, and they will be joined by 2 botanical artists. So for those who are less familiar with our botanical artist in residency program, that is a 3-week program. And those artists come and then they select a plant that they want to paint or draw. And then the finished artwork is accessioned into the Oak Spring Library. So it's always really exciting to see what the botanical artists gravitate towards. We've had many who are interested in native plants growing across the landscape, and some who are interested in plants, more ornamental plants growing in our formal garden. And then we've also even had artists who select something from our biocultural conservation farm. So our listeners can stay tuned to learn more about what those artists pick as an exciting plant to be working on during their time here. And as far as our short courses, we have a few applications that are still open and accepting applications. Right now, we have our summertime perennials class with Holly Scoggins, and the application deadline for that is coming up somewhat soon on May 27th. And then we are also now accepting applications for cultural and natural ecologies with Amy Myers and Therese O'Malley, as well as our ancient trees class with Michael Gage. So the applications for cultural and natural ecologies and ancient trees will close later this summer, and folks can check those out on our website, osgf.org, and then they can scroll down to residential short courses under the programs tab. And as far as one-day programs, we are also now selling tickets for our June open days. So the next set of garden tours, if people missed out on tickets for the April tours, those will be coming up at the end of June, and tickets can be purchased on our website. And then in June, we are also going to be hosting another plant expert, Andrew Hipp, who is based in Chicago, who will be leading a one-day class on sedges and grasses with our very own Charlotte Lork. So that's another cool program, kind of a one-off program that we'll be hosting this year. And the last update that I wanted to give is about an online exhibit that was just recently released. And this is a project that we have taken quite some time to develop with Mount Vernon. And this is to celebrate the 250th anniversary of America. So with Mount Vernon, we've launched launched a virtual exhibit that's about George Washington and specifically his influence and interest in farming. So that is a number of slides that can be viewed online and then also printed that has a lot of information about the crops that George Washington grew, how he grew him, the labor that he used and worked with to grow these crops. And that all lives right on Mount Vernon's website. So those are just a few updates that I wanted to let our listeners know about.
Well, there's always so much going on at Oak Spring. I wonder how you keep up with it all with the so many different programs that you have. And already you got off to a great start with the March guests that we've had here at Oak Spring.
Yes, this year we have definitely been off to the races as usual. But when you have such a beautiful site with so many resources, it's very exciting to keep track and see all of the offerings that we can provide to bring people into our folds and use the beautiful resources that Mrs. Mellon left for others to enjoy as well.
And some autumn highlights as well. Do you want to mention those again, because the summer will just fly by, and we'll be here with some of the highlights like the Rokeby Festival, that sort of thing. Is there anything that's standing out to you that you want to keep in our listeners' minds?
Yeah, absolutely. As you mentioned, at the end of September, we will host our annual Rokeby Community Festival, which is a family-friendly one-day event. There will be live music, there will be plant walks and plant talks, there will be a very large walk-through maze is kind of a highlight in my opinion. And then we will also be having some local vendors selling items, and there will be a couple small exhibits on Rokeby Farm as well. So definitely something that our listeners should keep an eye out for. And then later throughout the fall, we'll host our Ancient Trees class and a couple one-day programs with Michael Gage. He'll do a one-day walk at Oak Spring, talking about the trees and the landscape here. So for those who aren't able to attend a whole full week program, they can check out that walk with Michael.
And of course, you can find so much more information on the website as updates there and on the social media. Don't forget the website is osgf.org. And remind everybody of all the social media links where they can get real-time updates, Danielle.
Yeah, so they can follow along on Instagram at our account Oak Spring, and we are also on X. So those are some more places to check out the updates of what we have going on.
Super. And I think on Facebook too, Oak Spring Garden Foundation there as well. And the email address, if they want to find out more about the programs, Danielle, remind everybody what the email address is too.
Yes, you can write to us at programs@osgf.org, and we are more than happy to answer any questions about upcoming programs and events here.
And you will, of course, be back next month, as always, with an update of all the events that are happening here at Oak Spring. So, Danielle, for the month of April, thank you very much for joining me, and I look forward to hearing what's next at Oak Spring.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris.
And to all of you, thank you for listening. Don't forget to share this with anyone you think might enjoy the show. And, of course, give us a review on Apple Podcasts, because that raises our visibility and helps others to find the show. Do join us on any podcast app and also on YouTube. But for this month, from me, Chris Stafford, thank you for listening, and thank you to our guests again, Allissa Montgomery. Until the next time, goodbye for now.